and good morning, everyone. Today, our guest doesn't just navigate the US energy landscape, she is actively working to secure its power supply during one of the most volatile and high stakes periods we have experienced. Please welcome with me Lisa Jacobson as President of the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, BCSE. Lisa is the key voice representing the companies responsible for keeping the lights on. She operates at the crucial intersection of energy efficiency, natural gas, and renewables, the very technologies competing to meet the surging demand driven by new manufacturing and AI race. Currently, her focus is on ensuring stability by finding practical solutions to the biggest challenges of 2025, and including streamlining complex tax policies, speeding up slow permitting process, and rapidly deploying the necessary infrastructure for the grid transformation. Lisa is the ultimate realist, guiding private sector investments to support energy security and economic growth. Lisa, thank you for joining us today in the one of our episode ICWS Industry Please. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's really an honor.
Thank you. Lisa, let's start. In the race to reach net zero, is the biggest obstacle from your point of view the faster innovation or quicker policy approvals?
Actually, I would take it a little differently. I think it's deploying the commercially available technologies we have now. So scaling up is what we need. And as you noted in the introduction, BCSE, the Business Council for Sustainable Energy, we work with predominantly commercially available energy technologies, energy efficiency, natural gas, renewable energy, sustainable transportation, energy storage. These technologies are ready to go to deliver. They're proven, and in many cases, they're very affordable.
Thank you. I see. If we continue talking about the project deployment, for you, the most effective policy tool or technology that can really speed up right now the deployment?
We certainly have seen in the United States the effectiveness of long standing, durable tax policy. And while we certainly have had significant changes to our energy tax policy in the last year under the Trump administration and this new Congress, we still have really historic long-term tax policy that will impact energy investment, market growth for a number of really critical technologies, whether that be in the areas of renewable energy like hydropower, geothermal, energy storage, advanced manufacturing that's critical for those supply chains, or areas like hydrogen. We really have important tax policies in place, and we still have this long-standing window for investment. So tax policy is critical.
Can you tell us also about BCSE? As you combine natural gas, renewable efficiency, from your experience, what is the biggest technological challenge you have seen in the grid transformation right now?
I think this portfolio of low and zero carbon technologies, as you mentioned, natural gas, renewable energy efficiency, has really been the set of energy sectors that have grown, especially in the United States over the last 2 decades, if you look at what was built. And I think largely that portfolio is what's going to serve us in the next 5, 10 years as our energy demand spirals. And while we keep energy affordability in mind, this expansive growth in the energy sector is a really positive thing for the United States in terms of our innovation, in terms of job creation, in terms of our infrastructure resilience. So it's not something we should shy away with. And as I said before, we have many commercially available technologies to deploy, but we need to look at the energy system in a holistic way and fully take advantage of the optimization that we can have by using a diverse portfolio of resources. That is the biggest challenge. We still are looking at sub pieces of our energy system. We are not looking holistically or for the long term.
How you see the long-term role of natural gas and the net zero goal for 2050?
In the United States, natural gas has been a primary contributor to the reduction in greenhouse gas emissions in the power sector and in our economy overall. But the good news is that in addition to what it's already accomplished, there are many ways to decarbonize natural gas in our economy and also use the natural gas infrastructure that we have, whether that be increasing renewable natural gas, looking at hydrogen, using this expansive natural gas infrastructure that citizens of the United States have invested in and built out is critical. Natural gas will continue to decarbonize. That is the direction of travel. And that is good. But I think what we need to do, back to this holistic view, is really look at how natural gas infrastructure can serve us as we are decarbonizing.
To continue on traditional resources, from COP30 outcomes, how effectively are policy investment and private capitals can be influencing countries towards sustainable energy, especially for US?
Number one, I think the whole action agenda that the Brazilian government really took to a whole new level is extremely important to the private sector. I was part of many conversations where governments and industry were focused not on aspirational ideas, but really
Mhm.
rolling up your sleeves, thinking about how to drive new markets, whether that be in grid modernization or grid expansion in the power sector, or it be in the areas of hydrogen, thinking about how to shore up supply chains, not just for North America, but around the globe so that we can use the technologies in an expansive way. Those were really exciting opportunities for me. Also, there was continued focus on finance and in particular how to use blended finance structures so that we can really leverage every public dollar that we have with private sector investment. That is being much more institutionalized in the conversations about implementing the Paris Agreement, and the Brazilian presidency did a very good job of making that clear.
Staying on the climate finance, what is the most important policy or change, any changes we need to do in the next 2 years to fast and quickly attract these private capitals to speed up the power transformation?
Interestingly, I think one of the biggest ways to unlock investment is to make sure we have regulatory and policy certainty. And this is really important in the United States right now. Even when we had maybe a broader suite of energy tax credits to spur investment, we saw those signals from investors ready to go, but there was still a disconnect in terms of permitting, in terms of regulatory approvals, in terms of getting local support. So there's a lot that we need to do to enable finance to really move in. There are areas, for example, in energy efficiency, where we have a lot of capital waiting to invest, but we still have to get things moving on the ground to ensure that efficiency projects, whether they be in commercial or industrial settings or at the residential setting, we need to have that streamlined runway so that these projects can scale up and move faster. So in some ways, I don't think it's necessarily a finance tool. It's really ensuring that we have this enabling environment in place.
Thank you, Lisa. I want to move to more, let's say, about the industry. The energy industry has traditionally been male dominated. As a woman leader, what advice would you offer to mid career women striving to get to senior leadership positions?
I think it really starts with supporting women in the workplace at all levels and taking full advantage of an extended hand when it's offered to you, or creating your own networking platforms. That's certainly something that I've done from the very beginning, is try to work with other women colleagues of mine, either through the members we have at the Business Council for Sustainable Energy or in our broader energy network. Seek them out, create settings where we can come together and talk about life as much as we're talking about work. And that's just really critical for your career development in any field.
That's absolutely right. Thank you, Lisa. If you could implement one incentive today to accelerate the merging investment and private capital with scaling up to all this innovation, these technologies available right now over the next 3 years, what would be this incentive?
I think it would likely be in the tax code. We've seen in the United States that long-term, clear tax policy tremendously leverages private sector investment. So that's what I would suggest.
I still have one last question. Beyond simple emission reduction, what is the most important other metric that BCSE uses to measure success and resilience?
We look at the data. BCSC and Bloomberg NEF release each year the Sustainable Energy in America Factbook. And I think stalwart in every report over the last 14 years has been looking at the energy mix in the United States, looking at our consumption patterns, making sure that we're still increasing our energy productivity, which means growing our economy, and comparing that to consumption. We've had dramatic increases in energy productivity over the last 30 years, and we want to see that continue. So we're really looking at the actual data about what is growing, what investments are occurring. And when we see a line and a direction we're not happy with, well, we roll up our sleeves and get to work on that.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for all these insights. That's probably and for sure will trigger some other discussion and question from our guest on December 11th, which is exclusively woman leader discussion. Until then, I wish you a healthy and a wonderful end of the year.
Oh, thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. I'm Salima Ibach-Stephen, your host and the International Climate Webinar Series Commissioner, and I'm thrilled to welcome you today for a truly special event with a lineup of expert women leaders in the energy fields. This is our fourth discussion on energy and power grid transition by 2050, and this is the second time we have an exclusive panel of women leaders edition for the ICWS North American chapter. Now that we heard that interesting discussion, 10-minute chat with Lisa Jacobson from BCSC, we are ready to go in and dive with the main terrific discussion with our guest today. But before we do, I want to briefly touch on the work we have been doing. In our previous discussion, we focused mainly on the utility side, how they can rapidly meet the demand of EV infrastructure, large scale storage, and grid stability. That comprehensive session we had before set the stage for today. We will be focusing this time with our guest on the policy side, investment and technology solution for a grid modernization to fully enable transition by 2050. We are fortunate to have with us today four amazing leaders. First, we have Dr. Karen Weiland. She is the CEO of GridWise Alliance. She is an expert in energy policy, has worked with the DOE and advised Congress on smart grid and electricity. Thank you for coming back, Karen. It's always a pleasure having you.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Next, we have Jana Gerber, President of Microgrid North America for Schneider Electric, with 20 years of experience. She manages the region microgrid business and support customer sustainability and resilience initiative. Thank you for coming back. Also, Jana, it's always a pleasure having you ladies with us. Then we have Stephanie Bader, CEO of Electric Power Engineering. She is an engineer, an MBA with nearly 20 years of experience also in a grid modernization and renewable energy across not only US, but Latin America and the MENA region. Stephanie, we are really thrilled to have you this time with us. Finally, we have Nse Nseba, is the Senior VP of Green Economy at New York Economic Development Corporation. She's leading efforts to grow climate industries in New York. She offers support such as real estate and financial incentives to help bring climate technologies to market. And so we are really thrilled to have you. Thank you for joining from New York. Our entire discussion will be smoothly and moderated by our amazing Melissa Giunraule. Melissa is the advisor of at Women and Climate and also Creatives for Climate. She is also an award-winning communicator who leverages storytelling to help drive decarbonization. She will be managing this discussion today, but before I give her the mic, I want to say welcome to our wonderful ladies, attendees, and all on LinkedIn. Thank you for joining us. We are looking forward to your question and comments. Go ahead and send them in. Now let's get started. And Melissa, thank you.
Thank you, Salima, and thank you, Lisa, for that warm introduction on setting the stage for all of us. So I'm going to start with an open question for all of my esteemed panelists before we get into specifics. Since we're somewhat still hot on the heels of COP30, let's start with some of those COP30 outcomes and addressing those. Are there any regional or private sector steps that you think North American energy stakeholders need to take in order to advance energy and grid infrastructure and secure financing before it stalls? There's always concern about things stalling. There's a lot of movement that's forward and backwards when it comes to the climate movement. So what needs to be done from a North American stakeholder standpoint to ensure that that doesn't happen? And I will open that up to anybody who wants to dive in first.
I'll go ahead and jump in. The next 1,000 days, we say, are going to be very determine the next 30 years of the U.S. economy and energy leadership. So we're not really just in a countdown. We're at a tipping point. So, we recently launched a study by our sustainability research. That's Schneider Electric's sustainability research, where the U.S. must add terawatts and hours of electricity to meet the surging demand of AI and manufacturing and electrification. So we have a great opportunity, and that to meet this challenge, the U.S. must rapidly expand our capacity through the distributed generation, improved energy efficiency, digital technologies, and really the modernization of the grid. All the things we just heard about here just a few minutes ago. And, we believe that have consistently advocated that the accelerated electrification and digitization is the most practical and fastest route to decarbonization and to serve the time to power changes. So it's time to invest, and I think that's to meet the demand and really improve that affordability. So those are my couple points there.
And I'll follow up on that, which is that I think that as we switch administrations, people get focused on one part of the overall solution. So for example, you might hear people talking about, we need to build new transmission, or we need big new conventional generation sources. And we have a vision of an integrated grid that looks across the grid. We have to build capacity across the grid. It's not about just waiting for new transmission or just waiting to build new either renewables or natural gas plants. You've got to invest across the system. And that means that there's a whole suite of actions that have to take place, both the public and private sector. So we emphasize over and over again, don't just talk about one part of the solution. You've got to take action across the grid.
I'll jump in on that
Sorry, go ahead.
I'll just follow up on what Karen said. From, the perspective of New York City, we are thinking both around the need for demand side innovation as well as supply side modernization. So really very aligned. And we think that, we can support demand side innovation and supply side modernization in a way that also advances equity, ensuring that sort of the massive economic opportunity benefits the broadest number of people. So in New York, we're really focused on how we do that in a way that benefits communities and neighborhoods that have suffered from historic disparities and environmental injustice. But just really plus oneing sort of this focus on ensuring that as we are, as we're seeing all of this surging electricity demand, we are taking action both on the demand side and supply side.
Yeah, and if I want to add to that, I do want to say on the bright side that innovative partnerships between private sector businesses and state-level collaborators have always driven the energy transition forward through any past federal policy dynamic and will continue to drive progress. So what I want to add is the most critical step that I see is going fully into integrated load and generation planning. We cannot continue to plan load and generation in silos. And this is where the close collaboration between energy developers, tech hyperscalers will allow for this grid modernization to happen in a way that meets speed, reliability, and most importantly, affordability. So by planning together and collaboration between private and public sector, we can continue to drive the energy transition forward.
Thank you, all of you, for your beautifully articulate and insightful answers. You know, what's interesting to me about what all of you shared individually is that when I see conversations across the entire climate movement, whether that's indigenous wisdom, people focused on carbon markets, people focused on clean power, people focused on resilience and adaptation, we're all diverse and we're all very siloed. So just some of the comments that people made around, just now around investing across the grid, innovating across the grid, making sure it's inclusive, making sure that there's resilience. This is something that needs to happen across the entire climate movement as a whole. So it's great hearing just the energy sector narrowing in on that specifically. So I'd like to go to Karen first. Karen, you mentioned just a minute ago that it's important to innovate and invest across the grid. From a policy and regulatory standpoint, are there any gaps that you're seeing that are holding back smart grid investments? And if so, what should regulators be focusing on so that this doesn't happen, and then so they can actually, we can see some optimal returns?
Yeah, we just had a 2-day conference, our annual Grid Connects meeting, and this was a huge topic of conversation. And we talked, the conversations ranged from technical standards and interoperability to much more consistent interconnection standards, thinking about market access and how you compensate new players in the system, particularly how you bring the customer into the new markets and really take advantage of the behind the meter resources that can add flexibility to the system. So adopting the regulatory and utility models to move more towards a distributed system operator model, where there's an actual market at the distribution level. Figuring out how you can expedite investments in technology deployment while watching very closely the impact on rates. We had one presenter who talked about affordability, the issues around affordability. And it's stunning that in the United States, over 30% of Americans have over the last year had trouble and had to make choices between food, medicine, and paying their energy bills. And 1 in 4 couldn't pay their energy bill at some point this year. So, these are really significant issues of affordability that we have to pay attention to as we try to accelerate investment in grid modernization. And so I think it really means that a lot of our policies have to focus on the cheapest, fastest ways to meet the challenge of rising energy demand. And in general, those are non-wires alternatives and taking advantage of bringing the customers into the market.
Yeah, thank you for sharing those stats. It's a stark reality when we hear about progress, but then you also hear a stat on 1 in 4 people aren't able to pay their electric bills. They have to make a choice between food and energy and other bills. You touched on affordability already. What about the integration of new technologies? Are there any policies that you're hoping to see unfold or ideas come to the surface from a policy standpoint when it comes to integrating new technologies?
I liked what Lisa Jacobson said earlier, which is that, yes, we have to continue to invest in innovation, and we have to find ways, and many of our member utilities have a new relationship with innovation, and they're developing relationships with startups in a way that these very conservative companies have not generally been doing in the past. But it really is about how we accelerate the deployment of existing technologies. So those commercially available technologies that will allow the grid to be the platform for meeting energy demand and decarbonization. So I think that a lot of it is it centers around the regulatory bodies. So at the federal level, FERC, and at the state level, the regulatory commissions and how they can work with all stakeholders, not just the utilities, to figure out new regulatory models that allow these technologies to come forward. And I can't put I can't point to a single policy. It's a whole suite of things that I mentioned before about interconnection standards, market access, new rate structures. But it's a complicated process. But it isn't about the technologies themselves. We have the technologies. It really is the regulatory regime that has to adapt.
Yeah, it's again going. I'm seeing a theme already just in responses from the earlier question. Now, just what you're sharing is just when we look at the larger climate movement, a lot of the discussion around what we need to be doing, we all just need to be doing within specific sectors and disciplines of the climate movement. When it comes to implementing innovations that we already have, technologies, Lisa Jacobson's touched on this and you just echoed that. Are there any areas where you're particularly hopeful, where you're seeing more momentum than others, where you think seeing, oh, this is working, this is picking up steam, and we've got some, we're gonna be able to move forward with this?
Yes, several years ago, there was a FERC order 2222, which was about bringing aggregated distributed energy resources into the bulk power system, and that has been very slow to be fully implemented. And there's a lot of focus on what has to happen at the bulk power system in terms of the rules to allow aggregated DER to play in the bulk power system markets. This change that we've experienced over just the last 3 or so years, where instead of having flat energy demand, we have rapidly rising energy demand, means that there's much more push from large customers who have a lot of capital to make the investments in the system that are necessary to deliver that power. And what we're going to see is this change is meaning that we're going to see more aggregated distributed energy resources coming online, being driven by this energy demand, not being driven by a sort of amorphous FERC order. And that to me is really promising, because those distributed energy resources, those aggregated DERs, are cheaper and faster to bring on, and may in fact help us avoid having to make some very expensive investments in larger scale infrastructure. So it's a scary time, but it's also a really exciting time.
That's always good to hear. We've got to be able to kind of offset that the scary energy with where energy can flow in just as kind of exciting way, but with hope. I'm going to go to Jana now to talk a little bit more about the microgrid, digital and off-grid systems and grid resiliency. Jana, how do you see energy as a service microgrids with battery energy storage systems enable energy flexibility and cost savings, specifically for commercial and industrial clients?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved what Karen said and what was said in the prelim as well around technology that's already existing and how do we leverage that in a more efficient and scalable way. So maybe just to start, microgrids are a hot topic and a conversation a lot in the industry, but maybe just what is a microgrid? And I'll go back to Melissa, your storytelling, right? I live in Dallas, Texas, and we, a few years ago had our crazy snowmageddon or Storm Uri, where we had a lot of outages around the neighborhoods and across the cities. And so, I think that a lot of my neighbors have like solar on their roof, and they're like, well, I have solar, I should have power. And that's not the case, because we don't want that power feeding back into the grid. And so what a microgrid does is a microgrid can operate in concert with the grid, but also when the grid is not available, it can allow for that to create its own kind of self-isolated power system behind the meter. And so with that, then you're leveraging different distributed energy resources, similar to what Karen was speaking about. In homes, it would be like solar and battery. And as you get into larger systems, you can go into many different types of generation that are available in the market. So that's really what a microgrid is. And Schneider Electric was very fortunate last year, or this year actually, to be named by Guidehouse on their leaderboard as the #1 microgrid integrator, not only for our technology and where we're at, but also how we help our customers bring these technologies to market through energy as a service. So what energy as a service is that ability to create a financial vehicle for some of these larger commercial and industrial customers to be able to have microgrids in moving that cost from a CapEx model to really an OpEx model. So meaning that they're not paying for the entirety of the system up front, but paying for it as they're leveraging that energy usage in their system. So the energy as a service company will design, build, own, and operate those microgrids for those C&I customers. So again, maybe a little bit of storytelling. An example of this where we've done a lot of work with a customer is Montgomery County, which is a large county just outside of DC. They've done multiple microgrids and energy as a service projects across their entities. So they started with some of their more critical infrastructure, public safety headquarters, correctional facilities, but then have moved to also how they leverage this model and this technology to bring forth more electrification. So as they moved to a point where they were looking at bringing on electrified or EV buses, they've also leveraged now microgrids and energy as a service to allow for that to bring that technology and help to electrify and provide the electrification for those buses and the charging technology. So that's really kind of, there's other examples across the US. Another great one is with JFK New Terminal 1, the new airport. They are leveraging also an energy as a service model in conjunction with new construction, which is a whole new kind of model as well. So they're building the new terminal through a typical construction methodology, but then also building a microgrid through an energy as a service that will bring on rooftop solar, 6 megawatts of rooftop solar, 4 megawatts of fuel cells, as well as waste heat recovery technology as well. So this is a really exciting technology with 4 different power islands that will allow for that airport and terminal to remain operational for the safety of their passengers and the safeties of those working in those areas.
Yeah, that's really exciting what's happening at the airport. I lived in Puerto Rico for a few years shortly after Hurricane Maria hit, and microgrids, that was the main topic of conversation, is how will we be prepared when the next disaster hits? It wasn't a matter of if one hits, it was a matter of when. So it's always fascinating to hear about microgrid innovation and what's going on in that particular niche of this sector. I do have one more question for you, Jana, that's very technical. So we might need you to explain a little bit of the jargon for some people in the audience, at least for myself. And this is around microgrid design and software systems that are being used to accelerate the adoption of distributed energy resources like bidirectional charging. How does this actually work? Can you talk a little bit about how this innovation actually enhances grid resilience?
Yeah, so as we spoke about microgrids and some of these larger projects, right? They're able to be more customized and more bespoke for that particular application. But when we think about really where the need across the US is at, it's not in these there is need in the large infrastructure projects, but we have a lot of small and medium buildings and county buildings and state, local, and education that are needed. So with that, how do we take out some of that complexity of the microgrids and those large infrastructure projects and bring it to a way that's easily deployable, more cost effective, and less time consuming as well? So that's where the market is going, is how do we really standardize microgrid design in a way that then allows us to apply it to projects that would allow for leveraging leveraging a battery and a bus that can actually then also be helping a local library or some other public building to charge and to bring power to that building when the grid is not available. So it's an opportunity to really go faster and solve some of those use cases like bidirectional charging, and leveraging the batteries that are and the distributed energy resources and storage that is available in the market to help with those grid challenges that we have. So that's really, to simplify the question, that's the answer.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, very technical, and you handled it beautifully. So I'm going to go to Stephanie next. And before I get into the questions that I've got scripted here, Stephanie, I'm wondering if you can share what your definition of holistic grid design is. We just got to hear from Jana just about the design aspects from a technical standpoint, but I'd love to hear what does holistic grid design mean to you?
I love this question. So, the grid is like a web, and it has intertwined and multiple elements connected to it. And if we want to optimize the operation, the health, the affordability of the grid, we have to look at it holistically. Every component from a transmission line to a substation to generation to load to distributed energy resources to grid enhancing technologies to everything that touches the grid has to be studied collectively. And it's truly more than just the electricity component. If you want to think bigger and broader, it's also the integrated energy systems that affect the grid, how gas plays a role, how water plays a role, how telecommunication plays a role in designing holistically the grid. So hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Now I'm going to start to get a little bit more technical, and then maybe we can get broader again. So how can technologies such as platforms for real-time data, which everybody is always wanting, especially when it comes to energy use, how can platforms for real-time data and market insights accelerate renewable energy integration to support this larger 2030 grid vision?
Yes, very good. So, digital transformation, I know we've heard this term for a couple of years at least, and from many stakeholders, but truly it is the way we are bridging the gap between our 2030 vision and legacy infrastructure that needs reimagining. So historically, utilities have had to operate on static worst-case limits to ensure safety. This is truly a bottleneck and does not match what our current energy landscape and grid of the future demand. So custom platforms and AI will enable us to deploy dynamic probabilistic operations that benefit all stakeholders. And I know Karen mentioned that technologies exist. We don't have really to go and create new technologies per se. However, we can deploy these grid enhancing technologies like dynamic line ratings, advanced power flow controls, and topology optimization. And this is how we can unlock capacity on existing systems. If we also think about what else we can do with custom platforms and AI, they will definitely improve the quality and the speed to identify mitigation measures. So in the past, and not that much in the past, it's still today, software would tell an operator or an engineer, you have a violation here. Today, this is too slow. It does not allow us for the proper response to extreme weather events or conditions. Similar to Jana, I'm based in Austin, Texas, and our communities got affected with winter freeze and the Uri hurricane. And imagine that we were able to innovate and deploy these platforms, then we would have been able to dispatch faster and make better dispatch decision. And that would have ended up by us allowing us to save lives and significantly reduce the amount of death that we ended up having due to these extreme weather events. And last but not least, if we want to talk about the complexity and your question back to holistic grid, it is very complex. And what we are trying to do is co-optimize a system with infinite variables. And today, us as human engineers, there is so much we can do manually. and imagine what we can do when we enhance our platforms with AI. We can automate analysis and be deeper in the solution and allow ourselves as engineers to focus on the edge cases rather than just the routine constraints or the routine studies.
Yeah, thank you for that, and thank you for bringing it back to the holistic aspect of everything of how we're imagining the grid. So my next question for you is around AI infrastructure. And as an environmental justice advocate myself, but also as a former tech journalist and realist, AI data centers are not going to go anywhere. They're going to continue to pop up. There's one there's controversy around not far from where I live in Michigan, where there's an AI data center being built, and many people in that surrounding community are very upset about it. But they're not going anywhere. So this is kind of a regulatory question more. From my perspective, it seems like if we don't do something about it, across sectors, we're just really replicating the fossil fuel industry. And we're not going to have an equitable energy transition, which so many of us are striving to have. So from your perspective, as you're looking at digital transformation and this holistic view that you're wanting, what immediate grid investments are essential for reliability and resilience and a clean energy transition with regard to what's happening with AI?
Yeah, very good. As you said, these AI hyperscalers data centers are here and they're not going away. Now, are we overestimating, underestimating? Is it overhyped, underhyped? Time will tell. But this is our golden opportunity to be able to reimagine the grid. And the way to handle it is really we need to consider investments that provides us with flexibility. And this is why I want to really focus on three main essential investments. The first one is really the strategic co-location. This seems to be simple enough, but we're not doing enough of that. But truly, this is the most effective way to minimize costly new transmission build out as we build the grid of the future. We truly need to locate new generation and new load together at optimal nodes on the system. This will lessen the need for some new transmission build outs, and this will allow power to be consumed where it is generated, significantly cutting costs. And that opens up more the room for development, clean energy transition, and all of that. The second investment that we should consider is how we continue to boost resilience by accommodating distributed energy resources and microgrid. And I know Jaina touched upon that, but I truly believe that we need to design for these large loads with the thinking of islanding capability. This creates the concept of flexibility as well. It's truly not just about the data center by itself, it's about the broader grid. If a large industrial park or community has microgrid capabilities, they can disconnect during grid stress events, for example, and allow and preserve their own uptime while relieving pressure on the wider utility system. And a third investment to consider would be mobile and temporary assets. While we wait for long-term infrastructure, we need some bridge solutions. Again, that allows us for this flexibility that I'm talking about. Mobile STATCOMs and mobile transformers are innovative tools that allow us to interconnect a customer now while the permanent upgrade is getting built. These aren't just grid enhancing technologies, they are truly project enabling technologies. And by considering all of these investments, we'll be able to really leverage this opportunity of the surge of AI and data centers and build for a grid that is more flexible, reliable, affordable, and resilient.
Yeah, thank you for outlining those in three comprehensive steps for everybody. And are you seeing or hearing about momentum in these areas, or does it feel like there has to be some push to get us in that direction?
That's a great question. There is momentum. Definitely, speed to power is a theme that is not only in North America. I represented EPE back in October at the World Energy Council, and it is really a global discussion and where we all discuss the strategies for speed to power. So the strategic co-location, the deep thinking about DERs and microgrids and the deployment of flexibility is not something only affecting North America, it is global. And with that, there is more motivation for this creative partnership. And we are working as EPE, partnering with multiple stakeholders to ensure that this co-location is happening, that we do have those mobile, flexible, intermediate solutions as we continue to build for the grid of the future. So I am optimistic, not just as an engineer, but I do truly believe that these problems are really opportunities for us to build for a better grid.
Excellent. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to go to Nsé now. We can't have a conversation about the energy sector without talking about the workforce and without talking the important role that women play and the support that's needed there. Nsé, I'd love to talk about the Women New York City initiative. So when it comes to the New York City Green Economy Action Plan, the goal is to create nearly 400,000 jobs by 2040. How is the initiative specifically using programs to promote fair access and economic mobility for women in the best paying jobs that can spur green energy growth?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So, as part of as the economic development arm of the city, we are tasked at EDC with building a vibrant and inclusive, globally competitive economy throughout New York City. And so that inclusive part is extremely important to our mission, right? We are doing this in a number of ways. One key way is growing particular sectors like the green economy. And so it's we have a couple innovation sectors: the green economy, creative and applied technology, and life science. And it is within that sort of context that we partnered with the Mayor's Office of Workforce and Talent to put out the Green Economy Action Plan, where we articulate that goal that you just mentioned of, getting to 400,000 jobs in the green economy by 2040. And so the plan lays out New York City's commitment to accelerating climate innovation, enabling a low carbon economy, and advancing inclusive economic growth across a number of kind of goal areas: decarbonizing our buildings and construction, developing a renewable energy system, enabling low carbon alternatives in the transportation sector, catalyzing innovation in climate tech, and supporting the development of an equitable local ecosystem. And so under each of those goals, we articulate various commitments that the public sector will make alongside the private sector to try to achieve those goal areas, leveraging any number of sort of tools that we have in our toolkit, whether that's the 64 million square feet of real estate that EDC, the New York City Economic Development Corporation, manages on behalf of the city, or discretionary tax incentives. So I just provide that as sort of like context for what we're working with when we think about how we're going to grow our green economy to get to those 400,000 jobs, right, by 2040. Now, because, as I mentioned, inclusivity is so critical to how we want to grow our green economy, we are very focused on ensuring that key segments of New York City's population are able to access the green economy. And so we have an initiative, Women.NYC, where we are focused through that initiative on supporting pathways to careers in the green economy via targeted programming. And so, as part of the Green Economy Action Plan, we forecasted sort of what jobs will look like across key sectors of the green economy, whether that's energy, buildings, transportation. And we know that about 2/3 of the jobs that we expect in the green economy will be jobs that currently exist, but are sort of transitioning to have a green focus. But the area where we see a number of the newest, like new jobs, brand new jobs being created is in the energy sector, right? And so a lot of our Women.NYC programming is really focused on supporting women in entering the energy field and specific occupations there. So we offer things like digital office hours, where women can schedule one-on-one sessions with leaders in New York City's green economy. We offer a program called Insider's Look. It's an immersive program that provides sort of behind the scene exposure to various green economy sectors, whether that's battery storage or offshore wind, through site visits and conversations with employers. So we have these kind of like one-off opportunities that we offer alongside kind of more cohort-based programming. Our flagship sort of cohort-based program is something called Pivot to Growth, where participants create personalized roadmaps to pivot into high growth industries in the green economy. We've identified what we call sort of focus occupations within the green economy. So these are occupations that are unique or critical to the green economy, have a substantial presence, and are likely to increase in the future, provide a family sustaining wage now, and are accessible to a range of New Yorkers, sort of regardless of educational attainment. And so these are some of the occupations we focus on through our Women.NYC are the ones that kind of fall within that focus occupation framework.
It's fabulous. So I've got a follow-up question for that. Are there any energy jobs that you're very familiar with that maybe other communities and demographics might not be aware that they're actually energy jobs? Like how diverse and how vast is that spanning? Some people think energy efficiency or the built environment or transportation, like you've mentioned, but maybe there are energy jobs out there that people don't realize this is actually an energy job.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I mean, again, right, like when we were forecasting sort of what that 400,000 jobs will look like in 2040, a lot of those jobs are jobs that already exist now that need to transition, right? And so those are jobs in construction and installation. Those are jobs in engineering and architecture, in management, in business. And so, we zoom all the way down to thinking about jobs in carpentry, right? So our carpenters union and our ironworkers union in New York City is really thinking about mass timber and the deployment of mass timber as a low embodied carbon material as we build our city, right? So those are jobs that, are green jobs, right? We think about HVAC mechanics who are upskilling to be able to install heat pumps. All of a sudden, those are green economy jobs. Those are energy jobs, right? So those are just a couple of examples, but there are many of those. And again, we think the vast majority of jobs in the transition will be jobs that exist now that sort of need to be sort of reskilled in order to become energy jobs or green economy jobs.
Yeah. Do you see how quickly do you see that happening? I mean, the jobs that are not energy jobs at this point needing to start to transition. Are you already seeing that happen incrementally, or do you see it happening, skyrocketing? And I guess it all depends on the grid and how much gets invested into the sector, right? But I'm wondering if you're seeing any shifts right now.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. That's so much of our green transition is really foundational to our energy system. But alongside that, we are seeing in New York City, where we have really strong local legislation like Local Law 97 that is driving building decarbonization. We are seeing that there's increasingly a focus on, contractors in the building space are trying to upskill to be able to provide any number of services that will help buildings become compliant with that. So we are seeing sort of in the building decarbonization space, actually, that sort of being the area of broader green economy jobs that we're seeing the fastest uptake on. And a lot of that is driven by local legislation.
Yes. Can't forget the legislation piece. Thank you for talking about that. My final question for you is getting back to the economy. So to triple the green economy share of gross domestic product by 2040, how do you see investments in climate hubs and tax incentives for batteries fueling the private sector to take more activity?
Yeah. So, we as I mentioned when I was talking about the Green Economy Action Plan, we are trying to drive forward climate innovation in a big way through that action plan, right? And so we have made investments through the Green Economy Action Plan to establish a flagship climate innovation hub called BATWorks. It is an investment that the city is putting over $100 million behind, and it is it's a place in Brooklyn, in South Brooklyn, in Sunset Park, where we are bringing online about 200,000 square feet to support the commercialization of emerging technologies. We've talked a lot, various speakers have mentioned that we have a lot of the technology that we need already to advance our energy transition. We think that there's room to innovate around business models. There's room to innovate around how deployment happens. And we see this facility, BATWorks, as providing that. It's going to be a space that enables technologists and also folks who want to work in the green economy, work in these climate sectors, to have the space to build, pilot, prototype their products through programming, support, regulatory navigation. We talked about the importance of that for getting some of these technologies deployed. And that's both at the local level all the way to the federal level. And so we see, this investment as being really catalytic to getting us to that tripling of our GDP by 2040 that's coming from climate sectors. So that's just one sort of example of one major climate innovation hub we're investing in as a city. And then separately, a key tool that we have in our toolkit here at EDC is our industrial development agency, where we're able to promote and deploy discretionary tax incentives. And so we focus very heavily on tax incentives to support battery storage capacity and other green economy uses through that. And in doing that, we unlock, additional storage capacity, which will underpin a stronger and more efficient renewable energy sector. So just this year, fiscal year 25, the IDA, the New York City Industrial Development Agency, closed 14 battery energy storage deals, totaling 100 megawatts in power. And that's, again, we think really critical for how we how our energy sector is really going to be held up, and really critical for getting to that significant increases in GDP by 2040.
Got it. Thank you so much. That's a lot of information to process and synthesize everything going on in New York. It's incredible to hear, though. So we have 3 more minutes until we're going to the audience Q&A. So I, just putting on my journalist hat, have a question that I'd like to open up to the entire panel, if this speaks to you. From a mainstream media perspective, or even an energy sector media perspective, is there any particular part of the clean energy narrative that you think needs more attention, or that you'd like to see brought into storytelling more, based on what you're seeing at conferences, based on what you're reading in the news, based on what you're seeing in your LinkedIn? Anybody have anything that they want to share?
I like this question, Melissa. I think what I would love to see more is how we talk about true partnership and collaboration, and how we're not operating in silos, because this is what the grid of the future requires. It requires all of us to work together. I know we're at the end of the day, it's a business also that we run, so there is some competition. But if we all come together and think about what we're building for many generations to come, it's a big responsibility. And would love to see more storytelling about partnerships that are really transcend just the typical traditional partnership we see, where there is more creativity in how we're partnering together. And then we're not just adding value, we're multiplying it. So we'd love to see more of that in the future.
I'd love to see, oh, sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Karen.
Okay, I'd love to see more coverage of both the cost of clean energy and how how low those numbers are these days, and also there's a lot of focus on the very simple description of renewable energy as intermittent, or, you know, what happens when the sun doesn't shine. And there are, you know, we don't deploy solar and wind by themselves anymore. We have a whole suite of technologies that help provide the grid services that we need in order to have, you know, reliable power quality. And we don't talk enough about the kinds of technologies that help renewable energy provide grid services, or provide the grid services that renewable energy doesn't necessarily provide. So it's often a very simplistic message about clean energy.
Yeah, it's either we're far behind this country, or look what this country's doing, or this regulation got pulled back, so nothing's going to happen. It's very, there needs to be more nuance, for sure. More nuance. That's what really makes great storytelling. So I believe we're at time for this panel discussion, and now we want to open it up to space for some people from the audience to ask questions. Do we have any questions? I don't know, Salima, if you're jumping in on this point, or if you want me to take some from the chat. Why don't I take a question from Diane Pruitt here, I see. Is anyone involving more equitable community engagement and community co-design efforts and planning initiatives? I think I can open this up to the entire panel.
Yeah, I'd love to talk about sort of what we're doing around this in New York. We certainly are. So one of our big investments around supporting renewable energy in New York is the development of the South Brooklyn Marine Terminal. This is a 72-acre facility that the city owns, and we have, it's in Sunset Park, which is a community in Brooklyn, an environmental justice community that has long held a vision for the green reindustrialization of their waterfronts. It is a port that had sort of long been underutilized, and in really close partnership with the Sunset Park community, with some flagship environmental justice organizations there, and the private sector. So Equinor, who is a major former oil major, now does quite a bit in offshore wind, and had won a wind lease area in the federal auction. We have worked really closely with them to develop that port. It is now a $1 billion port that is poised to create hundreds of jobs over many, many decades. And I'd say that a real critical part of how we have been able to make that investment across public, private, and local community, across public and private, was through deep partnership with the local community, ensuring that sort of the community's vision for how that port would be reindustrialized, and you know, how we thought about jobs there and minority and women-owned businesses fitting into sort of the development of that port. That was really done in deep collaboration with the Sunset Park community.
I can maybe jump in with one other example from Schneider Electric perspective. Great. That we partner with a organization called Footprint Project. Footprint Project is an organization that jumps in with in after times of disaster. So after recent hurricanes in Houston or Asheville, they come in and they bring clean energy technology to help the communities rebuild, as well as start to educate those communities on what this can look like if we think outside of the box. And so I think that that's another great example of kind of that co-community. And unfortunately, it's at times when those communities are in disarray, but and challenging times, but I think it's a great opportunity. And I do want to give a shout out also to Diane. It's great to see you on the call, a past Schneider Electric colleague as well.
Great. So we're almost at time to go into the some final thoughts and some key messages. I'll hand this off to Salima to take us from there.
Thank you, Melissa. It was really interesting to see how our guest today is participating in these changes around the grid, energy supply. I can say that we have many attendees really happy to jump in and ask questions. I will try to take one last question before we put an end to this wonderful, really interesting discussion. We would love to have you with us longer, but we know that you have many other activities going on. We have a question from Alan Steven. He's asking what can be done to incentivize transmission operators to better optimize the capacity of existing assets through grid edge technologies, for example. Maybe I will ask first, maybe let's say with Stephanie first. Stephanie.
Yes, it's a great question. So I think providing more transparent and adding visibility on the impact that these grid enhancing technologies are providing in terms of improving costs, right? It's all about affordability and making sure that we get the lights on and we get reliability. So benchmarking and creating studies of what these grid enhancing technologies are providing and in terms of cost would be important. It will incentivize transmission operators as well as when we look at the big picture to consider more and more of these grid enhancing technologies, knowing that it's not saying no to build up of new transmission grid. It's altogether coming as a holistic solution is what we need to present more and provide more visibility on.
Thank you, Stephanie. I can will be happy to have a few words to this question from any Jana, maybe Karen.
Well, it's actually often as simple as requiring transmission operators in the requests to regulators for making investments. If you require them to consider deploying grid enhancing technologies, that consideration through benefit cost analyses actually pencils out, and it will show the regulators that grid enhancing technologies often will pay for themselves in a very, very short time. And so just the mere requirement that they consider deploying them actually will result often in more deployment.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And just really quick, yeah, last thing I would say is just building up those stories around when it's really worked well. So, I think Stephanie, you were talking about, those call to actions and having the microgrids being able, like a microgrid type technology at the grid edge, being able to support that. And so there's stories around. We have a project at Miramar, which was the Top Gun facility. If everybody knows the Miramar, the Marine Corps Air Base, but back in 2020, I think it was, the grid had some really critical times along the summertime, and they called and asked that the microgrid at Miramar to turn up, and they were able to weather through some of that storm and keep the local communities and those who were also on that grid, the branch of the grid, up and available. So I think we need to really tell those stories quickly and make sure that everybody knows the value that's added.
Thank you, Jana. Thank you, everyone. Before we end the discussion, I have one last question from all of you, including Melissa. If you want one last impression, one last line to stay in the head of our wonderful and very active today attendees, what will be for next year? Melissa.
What the general theme that I heard throughout the entire conversation really is inclusivity. And diversity and inclusivity and equity are not very popular right now in the United States, at least among certain powers. And so it's even more important, I think, for the private sector and for different agencies and for entrepreneurs and engineers and founders and community organizers and people like the brilliant women on this call to be focusing on the inclusivity of looking at the different technologies, right? The implementation of these technologies that already exist and actually putting those into place, and looking at just all the diverse people that can be focused on making the grid more resilient, from community co-design projects and women taking on different roles. So To me, it's we need all of it, just like in the entire climate movement. We need all the solutions. We just need to get very clear and specific on implementing them. And that takes everyone's input and insight.
Karen or Stephanie, do you want us to go our take from this discussion, the last one line?
Well, for me, it's about, I started with this, recognizing that that all of these investments are costs, and we have to be really careful about who bears the costs of these investments. And we have to make the investments, they have to be made, but we really have to pay attention to those people who are going to have the hardest time contributing. It's really important.
Thank you.
I agree. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jana.
Oh, no, you were on.
Yeah, Stephanie, you can. Yes, Stephanie,
so
please.
I do want to agree on the inclusivity, on the importance of affordability. We're trying to build a 21st century grid on a 20th century timeline. We have today diverse grid participants that are largely treated as separate entities, but truly, this is a whole systems approach. It requires all of us working together, collaborating on new levels. I take it back to Melissa's inclusivity and ensure that we have diversity of thoughts and diversity of participants to be able to get this right.
Thank you, Stephanie. I agree with you. Yeah, Jana.
Last thing I would say is just, as we also started with turning up the existing technology and approaches that we have today. And then I loved also the conversation around that it's an ecosystem. This is not a one part answer, that multiple parts need to come together. And so everybody on board.
Yeah, and I'd like to just connect the dots around the inclusivity and affordability piece, because I think a big part of what I'm hearing is, if we're going to really address some of affordability challenges, and we do that, we can do that through focusing on inclusivity, right? So the more folks have access to the opportunities that are being created through this transition, the more they actually have in their pockets, and the more we can also address the affordability piece from that angle too. I think that's really important to sort of keep in mind.
Thank you, Stephanie, Karen, Jana, Ense, Melissa. Thank you so much for taking the time today to share with us this insightful information. We are thrilled having you, and we will love to continue this discussion next year. We will also have other series that is going on for Europe, for Africa, and to continue this wonderful discussion around transition, transformation, upgrade, call it whatever you need, but we have to progress in the right way, have the investment, have the human side included, don't let anyone behind, have also the investment and the funding needed to progress. Until we meet again next year, I want to thank also our attendees who were really reactive today from to cite few of them: Diane, Patrice, Anna Steven, Erin, and Julie, and Joe. Thank you for being all this time throughout the discussion. We are coming back soon next year, and until then, I wish all of you, and I thank you for your time, and wish you a bright and healthy upcoming year. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.